welcome to this explainer. Today we are just going to bypass the usual pleasantries and jump straight into a high-stakes, real-world emergency that happens literally every single day. We're breaking down the exact anatomy of a water disaster. Because look, when a pipe bursts or a sudden flood hits, you aren't just dealing with a puddle on the floor. You are dealing with a microscopic, biological clock that starts ticking the actual second that water hits the ground.
Okay, let's dive into this. 48. Now, this isn't just an arbitrary number, it is the absolute critical threshold. You have exactly 48 hours before irreversible structural mold establishes itself in wet building materials. That is it. That's your entire window to stop a sudden annoyance from turning into a massive, hazardous biological event right in your own home.
Industry experts have a saying, water migrates through drywall, soaks into subfloors, speed determines everything. And it's so true. Water is this incredibly silent, creeping enemy. It doesn't just sit there waiting for you to mop it up. It climbs up your walls through capillary action. It burrows deep down under your flooring. Taking immediate action isn't just some friendly advice recommended by professionals. It is a strict structural necessity if you want to save the actual bones of a building.
So let's look at Chapter 1, the 24-hour threat, racing against the invisible enemy.
This right here brilliantly illustrates a literal race against time. Within just one single hour, water is already pooling and seeping deep into the subfloor. Fast forward to hour 24, and that moisture is actively migrating up through your drywall. And guess what? The clock on your insurance policy has officially started ticking. By hour 48, the environment is absolutely perfect for microbial activity and mold to permanently set up shop. What starts as a tiny, minor leak escalates into a major hazard in just 2 days. It's wild how fast it happens.
Moving on to Chapter 2, Ground Zero, Elk Grove's unique environmental risks.
To put this into perspective, let's talk about Elk Grove, California, which happens to be the absolute perfect storm for water damage. The local environment there actively conspires against the structural integrity of a home. First, you've got the Sacramento Valley floodplain and Laguna Creek posing serious overflow risks. But even when it's not raining, the region has this dense, clay-heavy soil that stops natural drainage dead in its tracks, basically trapping water right against foundations. Add in aging galvanized pipes completely choked with hard water mineral buildup and a high summer humidity that acts like a literal incubator for mold, and well, you have a recipe for total disaster.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the threat changes depending on exactly where you live in the area. In older neighborhoods, like Laguna West, the ticking time bombs are aging galvanized plumbing failures and deteriorating supply lines that just burst overnight. But over in the newer subdivisions, like Laguna Ridge, they face a totally different enemy. They get hidden slab foundation leaks, where pressurized hot water slowly erodes the foundation and then silently surfaces right up through the flooring. Two completely different eras of construction facing two entirely different catastrophic risks.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, the science of contamination, because not all water is created equal.
The industry gold standard, the IICRC, classifies water damage into 3 very distinct, highly scientific categories. Category 1 is your clean water from, say, a burst supply line. It's low risk and usually just needs standard extraction. But Category 2, that's gray water. Think a washing machine discharge. It carries actual illness potential and requires antimicrobial treatments. Then there's Category 3, black water. This includes sewage and floodwaters, and it is highly pathogenic. The true danger isn't just the wetness, it's what is swimming around in that water, which dictates that pretty much every porous material it touches has to be completely ripped out and destroyed.
Professionals also use a really specific classification system for the drying process itself. You might hear the term Class 4 drying. This is a specialty classification that applies to materials that absorb and release water extremely slowly. We're talking dense stuff like expensive hardwood floors, plaster, or a concrete slab. It's like a giant puzzle where the building materials themselves actually dictate the complexity of the whole rescue mission.
All right, Chapter 4, the professional counterattack, the 4-step restoration methodology.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the response needs to operate with absolute military-like precision. Step 1 is emergency dispatch. You want boots on the ground in under 60 minutes, 24/7. Step 2 is extraction and setup using heavy-duty, truck-mounted pumps. Step 3 is monitoring and drying, where technicians actively map the hidden moisture. And finally, Step 4 is reconstruction, putting the property back together to its pre-loss condition. The whole shebang.
And when we talk about extraction, listen, a standard wet dry vac and a couple of beach towels absolutely will not cut it here. Combating hidden moisture requires a heavy industrial arsenal. We're talking truck-mounted extractors capable of pulling thousands of gallons per hour, massive commercial dehumidifiers tuned for specific climates, high-velocity air movers, thermal imaging cameras so they can actually see the invisible water trapped behind your walls, and continuous moisture meters to track the drying process purely by the science.
So how do they actually know when a building is properly dry? 15. That's the magic number. 15% is the absolute maximum allowable moisture content for wood framing before the drying process can safely stop. Any higher than that, and that wood is just going to rot and grow mold behind your walls long after the crews pack up and leave.
But contrast that 15% with the number 1. Drywall is a highly porous material. It basically acts like a giant chalky sponge. Because of that, drywall has to be brought all the way down below 1% moisture content just to pass a professional inspection. It's a massive difference.
Finally, Chapter 5, the aftermath. Timelines, insurance, and final costs.
So the crucial point to remember here is that true restoration is a methodical, multi-day scientific process. It is definitely not an instant fix. Standard structural drawing takes a solid 3 to 5 days of continuous, loud, commercial dehumidification running 24/7 right in your home. And if you have severe damage, or those dense hardwood floors we talked about, you're looking at up to 7 straight days to safely draw all that moisture out. And you absolutely do not want to skip or rush that drying phase, largely because of strict laws. For example, California mandates highly regulated mold remediation protocols. We're talking negative air pressure, containment barriers, HEPA filtration, the exact moment fungal growth exceeds just 10 square feet. This surprising legal fact really reinforces exactly why hitting that initial 24 to 48-hour drying window is so incredibly financially critical. Once you cross that tiny 10-square-foot threshold, your costs literally skyrocket. Which brings us to the sometimes harsh reality of homeowners insurance. Yes, policies generally cover sudden accidental damage, like a burst pipe or a blown water heater, but they strictly exclude natural flood damage or those gradual leaks that you maybe kinda neglected to fix. Crucially, insurance requires you to mitigate the damage immediately. If you delay calling professionals for even 48 hours, your insurance carrier might just deny your claim completely. They demand detailed photo documentation and daily moisture logs to prove you didn't just let the problem fester.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to just look around the room you're in right now. Think about the walls, the flooring, all those dark spaces you can't normally see. Is your home's hidden plumbing quietly ticking toward a Category 3 disaster? Water damage is completely silent right up until the exact moment it becomes catastrophic. Keep this knowledge in your back pocket, because when that invisible clock starts ticking, speed determines absolutely everything.